Welcome to this Solutions Conference. And today I'm going to be talking about strategic modeling and the new Monte Carlo simulations that have been added to this. So, started here. A little bit about ArganointerRel. We're recognized experts. We have 3 ACE directors and 1 Oracle ACE and an ACE alumni. We've written a bunch of books on Hyperion and Essbase. A lot of you that might have seen them before, the Look Smarter Than You Are series. We have a good net promoter score. We've won several awards. We're full service. We have lots of partnerships, and we have a lot of experience. And when you hear about the net promoter score, what is that? That is a measure of how likely a customer is to recommend your brand. The average for system integrators is 24%, and we're sitting at 77%, which is great. A lot of times the global system integrators are only averaging 9%. So this really means that most of the clients have been very happy with our work. So that's really what that means. So what am I going to do today? Well, today I'm going to talk to you about strategic modeling, one of the packages within EPPCS. And I'm going to give you an introduction to what it is. I'm going to talk about how to use it, how to set up the strategic modeling, how to start building models. And then I'm going to talk about one of the new features that's been coming out, which is exciting, the Monte Carlo simulations. This is allow you to create simulations, which is great, particularly in these type of uncertain times. I'm going to show you how to set up and run these simulations and then kind of how to analyze the results. And then I'll have recapping questions. And if I see questions pop up, I can see if I can answer them as well live. So feel free to Q&A during it, and we'll have questions afterwards. Hopefully there'll be time. So let me give you an introduction to what strategic modeling is. Well, one of the things, and particularly over the past year, and there's been a really big focus on timeliness over precision, particularly when you're looking at your strategy, the higher level picture things. Things are way out in the future in a few years. It's easy to kind of look at what's happening right now and be precise, but when you start getting out into the future, you really need to understand the drivers of your business. One of the things Matt Bradley mentioned this morning in the keynote was talking about agile finance. We've noted now that there's a 70% increase in strategic modeling adoptions as part of the package. So that's been kind of more of a focus now, particularly people say, well, I need to have flexibility and longer what ifs answers as opposed to just knowing what's happening right away. So here's just a quote from Eisenhower. It was, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. One of my personal stories when I was in an FP&A department, we were creating a budget and we created several, I forget how many hundreds of man hours building this budget from all the different FP&A groups and all the different finance groups in the division. It got sent to the board of directors. The board of directors passed it, said it's a good budget. An hour later, they passed another initiative that just basically made the budget useless. So I'd like to think that maybe all that time wasn't completely wasted because we actually understood the business more and were able to now flex with those new initiatives. But the numbers that we actually put down on the sheet were meaningless now because the new initiative just gotten passed and it changed a lot of the ways we were doing business. But being able to be flexible and understanding how we built those plans was a way that we could turn around and build the new budget. So the real effective purpose, this is one of the fathers of strategic planning. It's not to make the plans, but to change the mental models that decision makers carry in their heads. So in other words, we can just take numbers and they couldn't mean anything, but if you make a different decision on it, then there's a reason why it did that whole budget. And the ability to learn faster than your competitors is the only sustainable competitive advantage. And this is how some companies learn to change and other companies don't, and they die off. So what have I seen in my experience the typical long-range planning process? Well, usually see the financial planning and analysis group is going to create the income statement. They're going to be in charge of the revenue and expenses up to around the operating income part. Then you're going to have treasury group, and they're going to be working on the debt and the balance sheet and those pieces. And then there's going to be some capital expenditure assumptions that are going to link the two. And then the financial statements get linked in the below the line area on the income statement, like depreciation, interest expense, interest income, that kind of stuff. And a lot of times the cash flows are a little bit of an afterthought, even though cash is king. You know, there's a saying, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. So here's a planning process cycle and how you may want to incorporate this if you had like a global company incorporate and want to put the strategic modeling. You have your corporate FP&A treasury teams, and these guys are going to be connected to Wall Street and the executive suite, and they're going to kind of have an idea of what their targets are going to be, kind of a tops-down approach. Then you're going to have your regional FP&A teams all around the globe, all around the country, or however you're set up. and they're going to really know the details of their business. They're going to know what their specific industry, specific areas know, and they're going to have a really good idea of what the bottom's up. So what you're going to do is you're going to have them kind of focus in on their planning and their forecast. These would be the short term. You're going to take the strategic modeling, create the long term, and then you're going to spit it out into a reporting cube. That way everybody can process it, and then you can complete that feedback loop. And this is just a continuous process of understanding what drivers of your business, when new information comes out, how we're going to take a look at it from the top down and from the bottoms up. So if we're going to put this into a data flow chart, where does strategic modeling fit in? Well, typically I would see that if you did the EPBCS suite and you're looking at the financials, you're going to get information from the frameworks if you have them activated, like CapEx, projects, workforce, et cetera. You get headcount and all those other data and drivers and expense. This is for the short term, the plan, the next year's budget or the forecast or this year's forecast. You're going to get your actuals maybe from the GL, from FCC, EBS, HFM, something like that. And you may have some other sources. They're all going to be feeding into how I'm building my near in forecasts. You're going to have planning forms that the analysts are going to be able to input that kind of stuff in. So then we're going to take maybe that forecast, and this would be one of my proposed ways of looking at it. Design would be take the short-term forecast, because that's going to have a lot of accuracy for the short term, and use that with the drivers and stick that into strategic modeling. So now I can take that strategic model and push that out the next 5-10 years, and then start really getting into the strategy pieces of it, going with longer range assumptions, different scenarios, et cetera. You may also have Excel schedules, and then you can stick into strategic modeling. Say you have a debt schedule or something from Treasury, something more specific. I can also feed that directly into strategic modeling, and then basically use the S-based reporting cube as the place where everybody can digest the information, kind of complete that feedback loop and make it easily accessible to slice and dice and analyze data. So let's just give an overview of what strategic modeling is. It comes with the Oracle Planning Cloud. You just enable it like other frameworks. But one thing to note, it is a custom financial engine. It is not based on S-base. So there isn't any S-base under the covers. It is some proprietary accounting engine. So kind of think of it that way, a little bit different. I'll talk a little bit about the integration, but you can integrate it pretty quickly with Groovy scripting or using data maps. And this way you can stick things from financials into strategic modeling, and from strategic modeling to the reporting cube, et cetera, back and forth, nice and easy. And again, the focus will be trying to create these what if scenarios. It's provided to, and you can talk to your salespeople, but it's now provided in pretty much all the different Oracle Cloud offerings. It is available, and one of the big pieces of it is in SmartView. One thing I will say, you can come in and you get it right off the downloads, and you'll see it as you scroll down. You'll see strategic modeling, you download it. But once you download it, I think you need to use run as an administrator. So put it on your desktop, right click it and run as administrator, because I've seen a lot of issues where people didn't run it that way and it doesn't load correctly. You'll also need to have SmartView installed before you can install strategic modeling. But once you do that, you're going to get this new ribbon on your Excel. It's just going to be right there next to SmartView. And it's going to give you these choices up at the top, these different menu options. And then when you open up your SmartView panel, you'll also see strategic modeling there with the forms and the different cubes. So when I talked about the integrating, it doesn't just have to live on its own. You can integrate using Groovy. Everything's kind of pushing towards Groovy now. It's a great new language, or not new language, but it's a great language that Oracle's really adopting to be pushing everything back and forth, and it just adds a lot more functionality. It's very flexible. You can do complex mapping, you can do scaling. It's not super friendly for people that are non-coders or even people that are used to S-based coding. It is completely different. It's an object-oriented language. So if you're Java-based, you're right on top of it. If you're not, it might be a little bit difficult. So it could provide higher maintenance. The data maps under the data exchange, that's nice. It's a graphical interface, easy for finance people to understand. You can download to Excel templates. So you can just, instead of having to type in and click each account, if you want to do mappings, you could just paste, cut and paste from Excel sheet. It's very nice. It's not as flexible and it doesn't have scaling. So here's just a quick example. You can kind of see the code at the top is a Groovy script, where the map is going to see, I can just go account to the source, account to the target. I can use a map, build it in nice and easy and quickly. So it's just kind of however you'd want to do this. I actually do a little bit of both. I use a Groovy script to run a data map. So it's just basically the Groovy code. It's what, 6 lines of code there or so. and it just is going to call the data map. But what I've done at the top there, the runtime prompts, it's going to allow you to, so the user, and what it can do now, because I've created it as a business rule, I can attach that to a form. I can build it into a right-click menu. So now I have a right-click menu for the anybody in finance to be sitting there in a form in financials, right-click it and say push data to SM, push data to strategic modeling, and it'll pop them up and ask them what scenario, what year, what quarters, what version, or whatever accounts I can. So that overrides what's in the data map. But then if anybody needs to come in and do any maintenance, they just go to the data map. And so they don't have to deal with this code ever again, but it just gives them that kind of a nice way that I can attach it to a form. I can run the data maps nice and easy, and I can have the flexibility of adding those runtime prompts. So when you get into strategic modeling, you're going to see that the framework of it is going to be based on models. So if you think about a model, it's going to have a built-in income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. They're going to be permanently linked with accounting rules. You check models in and you check them out, so that way two people aren't overwriting each other. And then you arrange them into a hierarchy in the consolidation view. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And you could set the security at the global or model level. And this is something that could be important just because, you know, it could be some sensitive topics and you don't want people changing things, or you don't want people viewing things. You can also save models off, just offline, and save them as a .alc file on your hard drive. Now, some of the considerations when you're looking at how am I going to build these models, how does my legal structure work? Maybe I like that, or maybe I want geographic. I might be thinking about M&A or divestiture, or I might want to think that certain businesses might have different impacts of different scenarios of what might happen. Or maybe I'm doing it by plant or by store or something like that. Again, this would be all unique to your company. Kind of think about how you would arrange these models. Very easy to create a new model. You just give it a name. You can either choose a template if it's your original, and you can see there's a few industries like healthcare, higher ed, retail, or you could just use a standard one, or I could create a model from an existing model. So if I built one and I know I have like 5 different plants that are going to be somewhat similar, I can start with one model, create that up, and then push it and create new models off of that, and then build up my hierarchy. So then what I'm going to do is take these models and put them in a consolidation view. And this way I can arrange them in a hierarchy. You can kind of see here, this one I went a little bit geographic. I have the Italian and UK divisions go under EMEA, and then those are going to roll up to the global corp. The nice thing about the way that consolidation views work now is that I can use different scenarios. So you can see I've created scenarios in these different divisions. I have a premium pricing strategy I'm looking at in the UK division. There's an upside case. I think the Italian division is doing well, but the acquisition target, let's take a look at it as a downside case. So I take all these scenarios, I'm going to create them into what's called a business case, and I can create different business cases. So this way I can mix and match scenarios from each different department and say, how am I going to feel? And then I can come in together, and here, like I have my board of directors case with the acquisition business case. Maybe I'll do another one and I'll pick it, the acquisition target as an upside case, and it's something like that. And I can kind of mix and match. I also have a bunch of different consolidation accounting methods. I can either just do a full consolidation for a wholly owned subsidiary. I can do minority interest or equity, and I can also change the ownership. So if we have joint ventures, et cetera, like that, we can kind of change, mix and match. And those should all be consolidated using accounting. So the heart of it too is a funding balancing routine. It's a funding option. This way that the balance sheets will always balance. The cash is always preserved. It'll start doing things I have to apply surplus cash to or fund cash deficits with. This is what I'm going to do with the excess cash. So maybe first thing I want to do is pay off a revolving line of credit, and then I want to put it into marketable securities. Or if I need to start taking money out because I'm funding a deficit, I need to start using the long-term, or I'll use the marketable securities first if I have anything like that. Then I'll pull out my revolver. Once I use up the revolver, I'll start taking out a long-term debt. But again, this funding option is what's going to allow you to always balance your balance sheet and always maintain your accounting integrity. So once you get into the model and look in a specific model, you're going to see accounts. The account view is the main area for your forecast. It's going to contain all the accounts. It's going to have all the income statement, balance sheet, memo accounts, ratio, everything you can think of. They're also predefined and are permanently linked to maintain accounting integrity. So what this means is V1000 is always going to be sales. I could change the name from sales to revenue or whatever I want to customize it a little bit, but it's always going to lead into net income, and net income is always going to go into retained earnings. So all that stuff is always going to be maintained, and I can't break that. But what I can do is I could sub-account it. This is going to allow me to customize it to become more like my own income statement. As you see here, I've sub-accounted it into 3 different accounts: product sales, service revenues, and maintenance revenues. Those are all going to roll into sales. Once again, sales is always going to subtract the expenses, and it's going to give you your net income, and it's always going to roll through. Another thing is the account groups, and the account groups are a nice way I can put all the operating activity, or I could put all the income statement things. So I create custom account groups. If I'm working with CapEx, maybe I want to take some accounts from the income statement, a couple of things from the balance sheet, like fixed assets, and I want to see depreciation. I could build these all together so I can get one nice little screen just from the drop-down menu that's going to show me all the relevant accounts together. Another thing about the way the accounts are, you can forecast them. I'll get into that. But if I type in a number here, like if I change sales, you can kind of see it's changed my discount and returns and my cost of goods sold, because I have those related as percent of sales. So it's nice when you're using the web view, you can actually kind of see how all the accounts flow together and what's happening and what's changing when I make one change into one of the accounts. So this is kind of an important part that I'll get into a little bit more when we start talking about the Monte Carlo simulation. But when you're looking at an individual account, there's going to be 2 parts. Here I've created a nice little account group. There's not much in it. It's going to be 2 memo accounts, volume and price. And then I'm going to have that sales, that V1000 thing. So the sales is the only piece that's actually hooking up into the income statement, which is part of the, the financials. But the volume and price are memo accounts. So I could do whatever I want with them, make them whatever I want. But if I look at each one, like take a look at volume, for example, going into 2020, there's 2 pieces. The green number, it means it's actuals. That's 19.134. That is the actuals, and that's just going to show up as unit volume. But once I start getting into 2021, I'm using the forecasting method. So there, I'm putting 4%. And you can see I forecasted that as a growth rate. And so that means I'm going to take that 19,134, multiply it by 4% growth, and it's going to get that 19,9. So here I can easily do it, and you see the 4s across, basically growing up that way. Same thing I did with the price. And then with the product sales, I came in with a formula and basically said, give me price times volume to give me the 19,9 times the 47.2 is the 940. But what we're entering, the numbers we're entering would be those 4s and 5s that you see as the growth rates. So you can forecast using these predefined methods. I can actual value, just type it in, that's what it is. A growth rate year over year, if you have granularity and you want to have some seasonality in there. Percent of another account, days, turns. So like percent of another account is used a lot. Like if I did that earlier, the cost of goods sold was a percent of sales, something like that. And then you could do free form methods. And this was me just typing in the price times volume. But you have lots of accounting, lots of functions you could use, kind of pretty much anything you could think of in Excel until you get into the real tricky stuff could be used to come up with it. It's not using any language that's like S-base or anything like that. It's closer to Excel. It has its own little funkiness, but it's pretty more straightforward to a finance person to see how to use some of these, like, the if function and all those kind of other pieces, but basically giving the flexibility to create any type of a forecasting method. Another really nice thing is the audit trail. So this is going to provide transparency. If I'm looking at my income statement, I could click on something here. I've clicked on the non-operating profit. What's that made up of? I could see it's taking taxable income. I'm subtracting the taxable operating expense and then adding the interest expense. And I have the ability, you see the numbers are blue. If I wanted to look into that taxable income, I could click on that 319 and it'll tell me what that's made up of. So kind of using this more and more, I find this audit trail is indispensable. I'm always doing it. And it's great too when somebody asks, where did this number come from? I don't believe that 319. Oh, it's made up of these 4 things. Oh, I see. Well, this is one thing that so it gives you that transparency, which is really important when you're looking at financial statements. When I mentioned earlier, we can do different scenarios. You have a scenario manager. And what this is the ability to create different things. I can do a capital addition. I just made these up. Premium pricing strategy, upside, downside. Here's your COVID. Here's a quick recovery COVID. Here's a slow recovery COVID. Here's what's going to impact of a Delta variant, that kind of stuff. So these are all available in the scenario manager. And this way I can quickly compare different scenarios, different what ifs. What if we say that our growth rates from before, instead of 4 and 5, are 6 and 7 or 2 and 3. What is that going to do? How is that going to look as I compare everything? You can create reports within strategic modeling. I can use that audit trail to go right back through the report. Kind of here, I could see I've compared my different cases, my different scenarios along the columns for my sales, and I can see what makes those up using that. Sometimes the reporting is a little bit wonky. That's why it's usually better to do a reporting cube, and you don't have like the ad hoc capabilities and that kind of stuff. And it's not quite going to be as powerful as the reporting stuff, FR and those kind of things, narrative reporting. So that, again, it's usually recommended to stick this back out to a S-based cube and do your reporting. But you can create a few reports in here, and this is nice too as you're working on the models to really get just some quick information, and I can get some good stuff right now and use the audit trail as I'm building models. Anyway, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Monte Carlo simulations. What are Monte Carlo simulations? Well, way back in the day, one of the genius mathematicians that was working on the Manhattan Project, which was in World War II, it was the nuclear weapons, his name was Stanislaw Ulam, and he got sick. And he was sitting there, and he had nothing to do all day while he was being quarantined, and he was sick at home, so he started playing solitaire. And he goes, well, I'm a mathematician. I keep losing here. What are the odds of winning solitaire? So he tries to build out this big mathematical formula, and he kept saying that this isn't working. I can't figure this out. I can't get it into it, because when I make one change, I've now impacted the rest of the pieces, and there's just so many different possibilities. There's too many variables that I can't just get into one mathematical model that I can solve here. So he started thinking about it, and he goes, I've talked to this guy on this project. His name's von Neumann, and he's working with this new thing called a computer, the ENIAC machine. And he said, hey, what if I took your ENIAC machine and I put in the parameters of solitaire? Could it just run a whole bunch of games, and then I could just count how many are this, and I'll just turn it into a statistical model. So really, that's how the Monte Carlo simulation was born. They, since they were working on a super secret World War II project, nuclear weapons, they decided to call it they had to get a code name for it, and they said Monte Carlo because of gambling and all that stuff. So really, what this is now is using computational algorithms that rely on random sampling to obtain the numerical results. So we start looking at the law of large numbers. They started using this. They started working with the solitaire. They said, wow, this is a good way of starting to do things. So they started applying this to their project right now. So they knew like how the average distance of a neutron would travel through a substance before it collided with the nucleus and how much energy, but they didn't have all the variables they could do. But this way they could just run a whole bunch of simulations using this new computer that can just do it faster once it's all programmed and you have the parameters. And now I can start coming in with probabilities of what's going to happen. So this is kind of really the beginning of forecasting the future using Monte Carlo simulations. So Oracle's integrated this into strategic modeling. This is going to create your probabilistic financial models, which is opposed to the traditional static and deterministic models. So in other words, a static model would be, I say 500 times 100 is, 500,000. That's going to be the two numbers that I put in, like we saw before. When I put in volume and I put in the price, I'm going to be able to get the sales. And those are just the numbers I picked. And I could do 2 or 3 and do different scenarios, but it's not really giving me a really good feel for how likely that's going to happen. So instead of assigning the discrete values to the variables, you can now assign probability distributions. So how do we set it up? So simulations are allowing you to use these more advanced statistical methods in your forecasting. It's going to automate your what ifs. It's not going to be saying, okay, I'm going to pick these numbers. I'm going to pick 5, and I'm going to pick 10, and I'm going to pick 20. It's going to say, you give me this probability look, and I'll come out with a whole bunch of different simulations. So how do you do it? It's pretty easy. Back to my volume, price, and sales that we saw before. I'm going to select an account, and I'm going to select actions menu, and I'm going to go to simulation. And then I'm going to pick a simulation method. I'm going to say, what does this start to apply to? So when you're setting up your simulations, you really want to think about a few things. You want to evaluate the input in question. What do I know about what's happening? Do I have some historic information, or where do I know that, do I have any parameters that I can do? And then I'll go through some of the descriptions. You can start thinking about how those would apply to each variable. and then I'll just match them up and see how they go. So the one that most people are familiar with is the normal distribution. And this would be something like if you're playing craps, you know, the 7, which I shouldn't say that name when I play craps, is at the middle of it, and it's the most likely outcome because there's the most chances of getting a 7, where the 2 and the 12 will be on the outside. So here I'm going at the familiar bell curve. The mean is most likely, it's symmetric, but it kind of tails off. This might be something like inflation rates, maybe asset prices, maybe some currency fluctuation, something that I have an idea that it's probably going to be here, but it could go off, but it's less likely as I move away, a standard deviation. And you can see here when I build using the normal distribution, I have 2 choices, the mean and the standard deviation. Another thing, once you put it in and you click on it, it will come up with a standard deviation and a mean based on the number that you have in there. So that's kind of nice, but then you have the ability to change those. Now, if I have the triangular distribution, this is when I have, you can see I have different parameters I can put in there. I've got the minimum, the maximum, and the likeliest. So this way I can either skew it like I did on the bottom where I've changed the likeliest to be 5, but here I do know it's going to be somewhere between -10 and 10. This might be used for commodity spot prices. I might have sales estimates, marketing expenses, something where I know, like in the past, but we're never going to, our machine can only build this many. So I know it can never be more than this. And I know it can't be less than this because it wouldn't be worth me keeping the machine. But most likely we're going to have this many in terms of volume. So it's a nice way of kind of looking at those kind of pieces. I might have a uniform distribution. I know that the minimum and maximum are going to be. I know it can't go above this. I know it can't below that, but I have no idea. It's all equal to me. There's no difference between where it's going to be. Here I have -10 and 10. It just is equal. It could be 5. It could be -5. It could be 0. I'm indifferent. I don't have anything that's going to say is anything different. So it's going to give me a uniform distribution. This might be like a fixed contract or something like that, or sales prices. And I know this contract, they're either going to do it for this much or that much, or marketing says we can only sell it for, we're either going to sell it for $10 or $20, but we're never, it could be anywhere in between, but it would never fall outside of that range. We also have a yes, no, which is a Boolean distribution. And that's just something that sounds, yes, it might happen, no, it might happen. It's like flipping a coin, but you can change. You can see the probability of yes is one of the parameters. So here I can go give me a 75, 25%, or something like that. And this might be like the probability of obtaining a big contract. Either it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. And I could figure out what type of the probability of yes would be. I can get a little bit fancier too. If I have some positively skewed, I can use log normal. You can use for asset or security prices. I could use a beta pert. And again, this is getting into just a little bit more of the statistical, but if you want to kind of nerd out on the statistics, you have this ability too. Again, I have the minimum and maximum and the likeliness. It's kind of like the triangle, but it's a lot more smoothed out. So how do we set these up? So now I've come in and I said, okay, I have my unit volume and I'm thinking in 2021, I'm going to grow 4%. But that's just going to be my assumption. So I click on the 4 and it actually will come in and say, here's a standard deviation. It gave me a standard deviation at 2. So somehow I'm either going to grow anywhere from -2.1 up to 10, but it's going to be pretty unlikely I'm going to hit those little ends. It's most likely going to hit somewhere at 4. And that's going to be what my mean is going to be. And then the same thing, I'm going to come in with the product price. I'm going to grow the product price at 5%. And I said, well, I know it's either going to be somewhere between 2 and 8%, but I have no idea if it's going to be 4 or 6 or somewhere in between there, and it's all equally as likely. I'm just going to say it's a uniform distribution. And the third piece, what you're going to do is you're going to select the output. So you can kind of see here where I have the 19.9 times the 47.2 equals the 940. So they're going to be based on the growth rate. So I click on the 940 and I'm going to set that now as my assumption for my forecast. And this is what the simulation is going to output. So now I run the simulation. It's going to iterate over those. It's going to be basically like dropping marbles into a curve, like into the bell curve, and it's going to be putting that. And you can select the number of trials. Here I've selected 500. You can go, obviously, the more you go, the smoother and more accurate it's going to be, but you're going to have it hit on time. It's just going to take longer to run the simulations. And it's going to come in and it's going to draw you your forecast. So how do we look at these results? Now that I've run these forecasts, I run this forecast on based on the model that I showed you. And now it looks like the probability of sales above 940 million is 49.6%. So that's kind of giving me right around the base case. So if I come in and said, I'm at 940 million as our revenue, I'm pretty sure pretty much 50% I'm going to be able to achieve that. I can look at the mean and the median if I want to get a little fancier on it. Or I can come in and look at the percentiles. So if I want to look at the 75th percentile, means there's only a 25% chance of achieving this, I might get up to 957 million. I can also come in now and start putting a target in there. So maybe I'm going to come in and the board says, well, you guys need to make $975 million is your target. You need to make this, and this is what we want. I'd come back to them and say, listen, based on what I'm looking at on my price and volume, I only have a 7% chance of making our target. So I can come in and again and put in that 975 and then come out and see what the certainty of achieving is. And again, now that's starting to give me some feeling. If they tell me I have to make that 975, I'm going to go, well, I'm going to have to make some other business decisions. There's something I'm going to have to learn because I only have a 7% chance of reaching this. Maybe we got to improve. Maybe I need another machine to bump the volume up. Maybe we need to get with sales and figure out a way we can increase price, something like that. But if I'm going to have to hit that 975, I'm not confident at all going into the board with that number. Even if you're telling me I need to, I'm only going to give you a 7% chance of hitting that. So you can see all the objects and you can take a look at them and then you can start changing them. So I could have this little simulation object on the side. I can look at the volumes and all that. And you can kind of see here of my 500 trials, when I'm looking at the unit volume, which I put as a normal distribution, the normal distribution is what, I was anticipating, that's the mathematical number. But you can kind of see all the numbers that it's selected, the blue lines, the blue graph chart. So you can see it's a little bit fuzzier, right? It's going to have some that were outliers because it's basically running a random number generator through a probability. So it's not going to be all there. It's like, you can't sit there at craps and hit 12 3 times in a row. It doesn't, it's not probable, but it could happen. So again, this is what's giving you a little bit more of a real world insight as opposed to just putting in the numbers that you think they are. And particularly with uncertain times, things that we've been seeing lately, this is one of these really powerful things that it kind of makes sure that you don't get caught off guard. And like I said at the beginning, if you know more than your competitor, you have better insight, better ways of looking at your business, that's going to really give you a sustainable advantage. Now you can select multiple accounts to be your forecast target. And then now the really beauty of it, this is something that's the power of the strategic modeling, is the fact that since all my accounts are linked, they're already set. It's not like an Excel spreadsheet where I forgot to put, I hard coded a number before the last board of directors meeting and now it's late and I forgot that I hard coded this time and now I got a .ref error or whatever, all that stuff. No, none of that has to happen here. I can flow these simulations throughout the whole model. So I can come in and I can start looking at my net cash from operations, which is like 30 cells away from being where my sales volume is. But since sales flows through and I can flow through my retained earnings, I can look and see how much cash I have. If I want to start working on my dividend policy, earnings per share, I can come up, with a better feel for my estimates on that. I could look at my debt covenants. How risky am I getting worried that I'm not going to meet one of the debt covenants? Maybe I want to look at an NPV of a project and say whether or not it's going to be worth doing this, or do I pay a dividend? That kind of stuff. You get to answer all the good, big, fun questions because they are all linked together. And I could come in with some certainty that I'm going to say I have a 7% chance of making 1.1 billion on my net cash from operations in 2024, given what I know now. But you have a feel that I can always probably what I can be more comfortable with. I'd probably be more comfortable with the 1.1 billion, as you can see right there, the 50% mean. So here's some design tips and tricks I've seen over the implementations that I've been doing. One of the issues when you're implementing strategic modeling is overcomplicating the models. Everybody wants to put everything they know about everything into these long range models. And you start thinking, well, in 2030, there's the robot Skynet's going to become self-aware, and there's all going to be these things we don't know about. Maybe another pandemic, maybe that there's, maybe everybody, we figure out we're on Mars. I don't know. But those details are not going to be relevant, and nobody goes to their, I don't know if anybody has ever gone to their, if I go back to my 2020 model to, sorry, 2015 model to see what's happening in 2020. We don't, but we have to have a roadmap for the future and have to have an idea what we're doing, but don't go too detailed in it, because you don't have the what ifs. You don't have the ability to make these quick changes. You don't know what levers you're pulling to make your company profitable or not. And then you're going to have a ton of maintenance. You're going to have people just sitting there working and headaches and making sure that all this, like, if you can kind of keep it simple, engineering background, keep it simple, stupid, just make it easy, therefore it gives you the most flexibility. And that's when you're getting into strategy. You're not getting into the nitty gritty. That's going to be more for the stuff that's in the financials, for the forecast. You want to know what's happening this year. I want to know how many heads to hire, that kind of stuff. In the future, I need to get more vague, but I need to be able to understand my business enough and what's really driving it. Don't want to get too detailed. The other piece is sometimes getting people on board with the tool. People love their Excel. This is in Excel, so you're not taking the Excel away from them, but make sure they know that, the smart view. But people have these Excel models, and some of these models have gotten giant, and I've worked on things with hundreds of tabs and all these different schedules and all these links in, and there's errors. There's a lot of things. You can do anything in Excel. I can, my cash doesn't have to bank balance sheet could balance because I threw in a random plug in there, not because I made sure I took out enough debt or anything like that. So people don't want to admit that they've shown bad numbers before. They've had bad forecasts because they didn't realize they had an error in their Excel. So you need to work on the change management, one of the softer pieces. So really, you want to get your strategy right first. Why am I building this model? What kind of changes can I do? What kind of decisions can I make the decision makers do differently if I give them a number? Because if I don't have a different number that they're not going to make a different decision, what's the point of even doing it? Is it just something just to have a piece of paper that somebody could say, oh, here, I have my long range plan? Or is it something like, okay, let's use that as the roadmap and really start understanding what we can do to make our business better? Another piece is to use the Oracle SR system. I started this when it first came out into the cloud, and there was some bugs and some pieces, but Oracle has definitely responded, and they're really good at using the SR system. They also enhance sentence are very nice, and people are really good to improve the community because a lot of other people are using this. So again, use the Oracle SR and kind of keep in touch with Oracle because they are good. And as it is part of the cloud, it's constantly evolving. So every month it's getting better and better. So keep up with that. I like to try to leverage the strategic modeling functionality when possible. Start it simple and then get it more complex, get everything working, get your balance sheet to tie, get your cash flow, everything to kind of tie to what you have, and then start making it more, then start building up little bits and pieces, work on your CapEx, get those kind of details down. Using the account groups to make sure that people are spending their time on the right pieces. And not having to scroll or flip all over the place. So you can really see all the different pieces that you need. You use the audit trail. They have things like the debt scheduler is one of the functionalities. Here I can come in and just put the term of my loan. I can put in, the principal payments and the interest rates and all that kind of stuff. And that's all going to feed right into my financial statements. It's going to put the interest expense in the income statement. I'm going to have the short-term and long-term liabilities. It's going to put everything in the right pieces, and it makes it simple. A lot of times, maybe you have more complex debt. Maybe you have lots of debt. Like an airline, you'd have tons of little pieces of equipment trusts, and you can't do that. But if you can, you do that. Otherwise, the memo accounts are very useful. You can use all that, build it out of there. You have that consolidation functionality. And again, if you build a model that's good and you have plants that are very similar, I can use that, build that up really nicely, and then just copy it because it's so easy to create new models. So in conclusion today, I just wanted to say we talked a bit about the introduction into strategic modeling. I talked about what are Monte Carlo simulations, talked about how to set up and run your simulations, and then about how to analyze results and how to start thinking about your strategic modeling. So I don't know if we have any questions or if there's I'm missing a chat, but feel free to type in a question if you have anything. Don't see any open questions. Oh, here we go. Is integration to SM open? Not sure. The integration to strategic modeling is coming through. You have, I guess, 3 different ways. You have the Groovy script. You have the data maps. You can also import on the web now. You can import an Excel schedule. Like if I have an Excel sheet, I can integrate using that Excel sheet. And then Smart View or the web version, I can, that would be actually typing in the numbers, like you showed you before, the 4 or the 5%, I'm actually typing that in. I don't think you can, it's probably going to be, Oracle preventing it going from everywhere else. Migrating from on-prem HSF to strategic modeling, yeah. So on-prem HSF was a standalone piece, and this is integrated in there. But you do, the migrations I've done have gone through, I guess, migrate the on-prem HSF up to 11.124, and then you can import them, save it as a file, and then import that into your strategic modeling. Basically, you're opening it up in your strategic modeling. So you would basically do that by model. It may have gotten, I haven't done it in a little bit, but I think it wasn't terribly complex. You're going to lose a few things. I think some of the online, some of the mapping and stuff was a little bit different, how it integrated directly to Essbase. So you might lose a little bit of the functionality, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward that you migrate the models into the web. But I think they wanted you to migrate it up to 11.124 first, and then go up into the web. We're doing that time. Another few minutes. I just had a chat about the crap analogy, that she liked that she hit 10 points in a row on her birthday, 10-10 actually. Wow, that's amazing. She recently was in Vegas, and now they have these digital craps tables. They're the same table, and you actually throw the dice the same, but the whole thing lights up, and you use a keypad instead of using chips, or a little iPad. And once you hit a certain number, like after you hit 3, it like flames start shooting up on the table, and then the flames turn blue and do all this kind of fancy stuff. So 10-10 would have just had that table going crazy. All right, well, oh, I just saw another thing. Our statistical relationships pre-built in SM. Yeah, so I think what they've done is they've taken some of the functionality out of the crystal ball, the old crystal ball thing, which they've retired now, unfortunately. But that is where they're getting some of that Monte Carlo simulation from. But those statistical relationships, those pieces that I was showing you, those are all pre-built. Those are your only choices as well as of now. They may or may not add more, but like the triangle and the normal and the logarithmic, all those kind of pieces, those are pre-built into the strategic modeling, and you put those into your inputs, and then your outputs are going to come out. But it's actually pretty quick to be able to set those up, just like I kind of showed you in a couple slides. So it's very easy to start using that. This is functionality of ePBCS, not offered on on-prem Hyperion. Correct. Yes. Yes. And actually right now, this is only in the web version. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's coming out on the smart view, but you have to actually go into the web to run the simulations on it. And that is EPBCS. All right, well, that puts us at time. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and some of the great questions. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.